Most students remember Lady Macbeth as a villain of the play, a woman who persuades Macbeth to murder Duncan, the woman who calls on evil spirits, the woman who seems completely ruthless. But here is the interesting question. If Lady Macbeth is so strong, so confident, and so fearless at the beginning of the play, why does she end it sleepwalking through the castle trying to wash imaginary blood from her hands? Today we're going to follow Lady Macbeth's entire journey from power to destruction. Lady Macbeth enters the play already knowing exactly what she wants. Power, not money, not comfort, but power. What's striking is how quickly she takes control. The moment she reads Macbeth's letter, she doesn't panic. She doesn't hesitate. She immediately starts making plans, and that's important. A lot of students assume Macbeth is the driving force at the start of the play. Actually, Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as the more decisive partner. She's intelligent, she's perceptive, and she understands her husband better than anyone else. But Shakespeare also plants the seeds of tragedy here. The quality that makes her powerful are the same qualities that eventually will destroy her. One of Lady Macbeth's most revealing quotations comes incredibly early in the play. Yet do I fear thy nature. What's fascinating is she's not criticising Macbeth for lacking ambition. She knows he's ambitious. The problem is that she thinks he's too moral, too kind, too human. She believes he wants the crown but doesn't have the ruthlessness needed to take it. And notice what Shakespeare is doing. Lady Macbeth's first instinct isn't to stop Macbeth, it's to help him overcome his conscience. And that tells us everything about her priorities. Power comes first, morality comes second. Unsex me here, this speech is one of the most famous in the entire play, and probably one of the most shocking for a Jacobean audience. When Lady Macbeth says unsex me here, she isn't literally asking to become a man. She's asking to remove everything society associates with femininity, compassion, kindness, empathy, remorse. She believes these qualities will stop her achieving power. What's really interesting is that Shakespeare may be making a much larger point here. Why does Lady Macbeth feel she has to reject her femininity in order to gain influence? Perhaps because women in Jacobean society have almost no political power. This makes Lady Macbeth both frightening and strangely sympathetic. Lady Macbeth understands something about Macbeth that even Macbeth doesn't fully understand about himself. He wants the crown, but he doesn't want to dirty his hands getting it. Lady Macbeth sees this contradiction immediately, and unlike Macbeth, she doesn't seem troubled by it. At this point of the play, ambition operates almost like a religion for her. Everything else is secondary: friendship, loyalty, morality, and human life. Shakespeare presents ambition here not as something inspiring, but as something dangerous, something capable of consuming everything around it. Now we see Lady Macbeth at her most powerful. Macbeth is having doubts. He's considering abandoning the plan, and Lady Macbeth knows exactly how to respond. She attacks his masculinity. When you just do it, then you were a man. This isn't random. She knows Macbeth is a warrior. His identity is built around courage and strength. So instead of arguing logically, she makes him feel weak, and it works. One of the most important ideas for your exam is this. Lady Macbeth doesn't force Macbeth to commit murder. She manipulates him into choosing it. It's a subtle but very important difference. If there is one point in the play where Lady Macbeth has complete control, it is here. She is calm. While Macbeth is seeing hallucination, questioning everything, Lady Macbeth is organising the murder, drugging the guards, planning the details, managing the situation. Her command, leave all the rest to me, sounds almost military. At this point, she isn't following Macbeth, she's leading him. And Shakespeare deliberately places her at the highest of her power, so her eventual downfall feels even more dramatic. Immediately after Duncan's murder, Lady Macbeth still appears strong. Macbeth is panicking, he's carrying the daggers, he's hearing voices, he's overwhelmed with guilt. Lady Macbeth takes control. She returns the daggers herself, she frames the guards, and then says, "A little water clears us of this deed." And this might be one of the most ironic lines she ever speaks, because later in the play she spends her nights desperately trying to wash away blood that isn't really there. At this point she believes guilt is temporary, when Shakespeare is about to prove her wrong. This is where the cracks begin to appear. The crown has been worn, the plan succeeded, everything Lady Macbeth wanted has happened, yet she is unhappy. That's incredibly important, because Shakespeare is asking a simple question. What if achieving your ambition doesn't actually make you happy? Naught's had all's spent. It's one of the saddest moments in her story. She finally realises that power cannot give her the peace and satisfaction she was looking for. One of the biggest changes in the play is that Macbeth stops needing Lady Macbeth. Earlier, they were partners, they shared secrets, they planned together. Now Macbeth starts making decisions alone. In Act 3, he arranges Banquo's murder without consulting her. He orders more killings in Act 4, and Lady Macbeth becomes increasingly isolated. There's a tragic irony here. She helped create the powerful king she wanted, and then that king leaves her behind. The sleepwalking scene is one of the most important moments where everything collapses for Lady Macbeth. The woman who once dismissed guilt now cannot escape it. She sleepwalks through the castle. She rubs her hands together. She tries to wash away blood that doesn't exist. Out-damned spot. The blood is symbolic. It's guilt made visible. What's powerful about this scene is that Lady Macbeth isn't being punished by a new king or by a law or by other characters. She is being punished here by her own mind. Shakespeare is suggesting that guilt may be the hardest punishment for all. If we zoom out and look at her entire journey, it's extraordinary. She begins in Act 1 as one of the strongest characters of the play, confident, powerful, and fearless. And she ends up completely broken. What's especially tragic is that her downfall is mostly private. Macbeth falls publicly on a battlefield, where Lady Macbeth falls inside her own mind. And in many ways, her ending is even more haunting. Lady Macbeth is one of Shakespeare's most important explorations of gender. She constantly links masculinity with violence and power. At the same time, she demonstrates qualities traditionally associated with men: leadership, determination, strength. These create contradictions. She rejects traditional femininity, yet can never fully escape the society she lives in. That's why grade 9 students often argue that Lady Macbeth exposes the limitations placed on women in Jacobean England. The strongest essayists don't argue that Lady Macbeth is one thing. Instead, they explore multiple interpretations. Maybe she's a warning about ambition. Maybe she's a victim of guilt. Maybe she's trapped by gender expectations. Maybe she's challenging the values of her society. The best answers usually combine several of these ideas together, because Shakespeare's greatest characters are never just simple. If your exam was tomorrow and you could only revise a handful of quotations, these are a great place to start, because they cover so many of Lady Macbeth's story and themes. Here we have ambition, power, manipulation, guilt, regret, and madness. Together, they form a complete character arc, and that's exactly what examiners are really looking for when focusing on a question on a character. Notice how all these questions are really asking the same thing. How does Lady Macbeth change? Whether you're discussing ambition, guilt, power, gender, you're tracking the same journey, from dominant control to broken sleepwalker. That's the thread connecting every essay. If you remember one thing from this video, remember this. Lady Macbeth doesn't fail because she wanted power. Many characters want power. Lady Macbeth fails because she completely underestimates the psychological cost of getting it. She thinks murder is a practical problem. Shakespeare shows it's a psychological one. And that's a mistake she never recovers from. So was Lady Macbeth a villain, a victim, a warning, or something else entirely? The answer is probably all of those things. That's what makes her such a brilliant Shakespearean character. She's powerful and vulnerable, manipulative and tragic, fearless and fragile. And more than 400 years later, we're still debating exactly who she really was. Good luck with your revision, and I'll see you in the next one.